Frog God. It is said that in the Yangtze and Han River areas in the south, people believe in the frog god most devoutly. There are tens of millions of frogs in the frog god temple, some of which are as big as steamers. If someone offends God, strange signs will appear in the house. Frogs will crawl around on tables and beds, and even climb onto slippery walls without falling off. Once the sign appears, it indicates that something bad will happen to the family. People will be very frightened, kill the livestock in a hurry, and go to the shrine to pray. Once the god is happy, everything will be fine. There was a man named Zhu Kunsheng in Hubei who was smart and handsome since he was a child. When he was 6 or 7 years old, an old lady in Tiesing Yi came to his home, claiming to be the messenger of the frog god, and came to convey the frog god's will. She was willing to marry her daughter to Kunsheng. Zhu Kunsheng's father was a simple and kind man, and he was very unhappy, so he refused, saying that his son was still too young. However, even though he rejected the frog god's marriage proposal, he did not dare to immediately propose another marriage to his son. A few years later, when Kunsheng grew up, Zhu Weng got engaged to the Zhang family. The frog god told the Zhang family, "Zhu Kunsheng is my son-in-law. How dare you get involved?" The Zhang family was afraid and hurriedly returned the Zhu family's betrothal gift. Zhu Weng was very worried, so he prepared sacrifices and went to the frog temple to pray. He said that he really did not dare to marry the gods. Just after praying, I saw a layer of giant maggots emerging from the food and wine, squirming in the cups and plates. Zhu Weng hurriedly threw away the food and wine, apologized, and returned home. He was even more frightened and had no choice but to let it go. One day, Kunsheng went out and met a messenger on the road. He read God's decree to him and invited him to come. Kunsheng had no choice but to follow the messenger. Entering a red-painted gate, you can see the gorgeous pavilions. There was an old man sitting in the main room, who looked like he was 70 or 80 years old. Kunsheng prostrated himself on the ground. The old man ordered him to help him up and sit down at the table. After a while, the slaves and women came to see Kunsheng, and they crowded both sides of the hall. The old man said to them, "Go in and say that Zhu Lang is here." Several slaves hurried over. Not long after, I saw an old lady leading a young girl out, about 16 or 17 years old, extremely beautiful. The old man pointed at the girl and said to Kunsheng, "This is my daughter Xiniang. I think she and you are a perfect couple, but your father rejected her because she is not the same kind. This is your centenary event. Your parents can only be half the master. It mainly depends on what you want." Kunsheng stared at Xiniang intently, loving her so much that he forgot to say anything. The old lady said to him, "I already knew that Zhu Lang was very willing. You go back first, and I will send Xiniang away later." Kunsheng agreed. "Okay." He said goodbye, ran home in a hurry, and told his father. Zhu Weng couldn't think of any other way in a hurry, so he told his son to go back quickly and decline. Kunsheng didn't want to, and while the father and son were arguing, the vehicle sending the bride off had arrived at the door. And a group of maids in green clothes walked in, surrounded by Xiniang. Xiniang walked into the main room to meet her parents-in-law. When Zhu Weng and his wife saw that Xiniang was very beautiful, they both fell in love with her. That night, Kunsheng and Xiniang got married. The young couple loved each other and had a close relationship. From then on, the goddess's parents often visited Kunsheng's house. Looking at their clothes, as long as they wear red clothes, it indicates that the Zhu family will have happy events. If they wear white clothes, the Zhu family will get rich, which is very effective. Therefore, the Zhu family became prosperous day by day. But since I got married to the goddess, there have been frogs everywhere, at the door of my house, in the main room, on the fence, and in the toilet. No one in the family dared to scold or step on him. Kunsheng was young and willful. He loved the frogs when he was happy, but trampled on them when he was angry without any scruples. Although Xiniang was modest and docile, she was angry by nature and was very dissatisfied with Kunsheng's actions. Kansheng still refused to restrain himself for Xinjiang's sake. One time, Xinjiang couldn't bear it any longer and scolded him. Kansheng got angry and said, "Can you do harm to others by relying on your parents? How can a man be afraid of frogs?" Xinjiang was most taboo about saying the word frog. After hearing this, Kansheng was very angry and said, "Since I entered your house, your fields have produced more food, and you have made more money from business. Now, all the old and young are well fed and clothed. So we need all. If you have wings, you want to eat your mother's eyes." Kansheng became more and more angry and cursed. "I hate that these things you brought are too dirty, and I'm embarrassed to pass them on to my children and grandchildren. Why don't we break up early?" and drove Xinjiang away. Go out. When Kansheng's parents heard about it, they rushed over and Xinjiang was gone. Then he scolded Kansheng and asked him to go and recover Xinjiang quickly. Kansheng was furious and determined not to go. At night, Kansheng and his mother suddenly fell ill and became too depressed to eat. Zhu Weng was frightened and went to the temple to plead guilty with a thorn on his back, speaking sincerely. After 3 days, the mother and son were cured of their illness. Xinjiang also came back on her own. From then on, the couple reconciled, just like before. It was difficult for Xinjiang to take care of Envy Hong, so she dressed up and sat upright every day. Kansheng's clothes, shoes, and hats were all left to her mother-in-law. One day, Kansheng's mother said angrily, "My son has already married a daughter-in-law, and he is here to trouble his mother." In other families, the daughter-in-law serves the mother-in-law. But in our family, the mother-in-law serves the daughter-in-law. This happened to be heard by Xinjiang, who left in anger. Enter the main room. He asked his mother-in-law, "My daughter-in-law serves you to eat in the morning and to sleep with you in the evening. What else has she not done to serve your mother-in-law? What is missing is that she cannot save the money of hiring people and just have to suffer on her own." The mother was speechless. Yan, feeling ashamed and sad, couldn't help crying. Kansheng came in and saw tears on his mother's face. He asked why and scolded Xinjiang angrily, but Xinjiang argued without giving in. Kansheng was furious and said, "If you can't serve your mother well, if you have a wife, it's better not to have one at all. Even if you try to offend the old frog, you'll just die in misfortune." He drove Xinjiang away again. Xinjiang also got angry and went out alone. The next day, a fire broke out in the Zhu family, burning several rooms, tables, and beds, and turning them into ashes. Kansheng was furious and ran to the shrine to reprimand. "My adopted daughter doesn't serve her parents-in-law. She doesn't have any tutoring, and she just protects her shortcomings. Gods are the most just. Can anyone teach people to be afraid of their wives? Besides, quarrels and scoldings, I did it all by myself. What does it have to do with my parents? I am responsible for the chopping with knives and axes. Otherwise, I will also burn down your old house in return." After saying that, he moved the firewood and piled it under the highness. Want a fire? People in the village came to beg him, and Kansheng returned home angrily. When the parents heard about it, they were shocked. At night, the frog god gave a dream to the people in the neighboring village and asked them to build a new house for the son-in-law's family. After dawn, people from neighboring villages brought in wood and hired craftsmen to build a house for Kansheng. Kansheng's family couldn't refuse. Hundreds of people came to help every day. Within a few days, the family's house was completely new, and even beds, curtains, and other equipment were prepared. Just after finishing the tidying up, Xinjiang came back. "I went to the hall to apologize to my mother-in-law, and my words were very gentle." He turned around and smiled at Kansheng again, and the whole family turned their resentment into joy. After that, Xinjiang became more harmonious and did not have any trouble for 2 consecutive years. Xinjiang hates snakes the most. Once, Kansheng put a small snake into a wooden box as a joke and tricked Xinjiang into opening it and taking a look. Xinjiang opened it and took a look. She was so frightened that her face turned pale and she scolded Kansheng. Kunsheng also turned from laughter to anger and added harsh words. Xinyan said, "There's no need for you to chase me away this time. From now on, we'll be inseparable," and went straight out. Zhu Wang was so frightened that he beat Kunsheng angrily and went to the temple to plead guilty. Fortunately, there was no disaster this time, and there was no news from Xinyan. More than a year later, Kunsheng missed Xinyan and regretted it very much. I secretly ran to the shrine to beg her to come back, but there was still no reply. Not long after, he heard that the frog god had remarried Xinyan to the Yuan family. Kunsheng was greatly disappointed, so he also proposed marriage to other families. But Lin Shang visited several houses, and none of them could compare with Xinyan, so he missed her even more. I went to Yuan's house to have a look and saw that the house was new, so I was waiting for Xinyan to come. Kunsheng became more and more regretful, refused to eat or drink, and fell ill. The parents are worried and anxious and don't know what to do. Kunsheng was in a coma when he heard someone caressing him and saying, "A real man often wants to break up with me. Why do you act like this again?" When he opened his eyes, he saw that it was Xinyan. Kunsheng was overjoyed and jumped up and said, "Why are you here?" Xinyan said, "If I want to treat me the way you did before, I should obey my father's order and remarry someone else. I had accepted the Yuan family's offer very early, the bride price, but I thought about it so much that I couldn't bear to leave you. The wedding was tonight, and my father had no shame in going back on his word with the Yuan family. So I had no choice but to take the bride price and return it to the Yuan family. When I came home just now, my father said to me, 'Stupid girl, if you don't listen to me, you will be bullied and abused by the Zhu family in the future. Don't come back even if you die.'" Kunsheng was grateful for her kindness and couldn't help crying. The family members were all very happy and hurriedly ran to tell Zhu Wang. After the mother-in-law heard about it, she couldn't wait for Xinyan to visit her, so she hurried to her son's room, held Xinyan's hand and cried. From then on, Kunsheng became more mature and stopped playing pranks. The relationship between the couple is even deeper. One day, Xinyan said to Kunsheng, "I used to worry that we might not grow old together because you were too frivolous, so I didn't dare to give birth to an offspring to stay in the world. Now I can. I'm going to give birth to a son soon." Not long ago, at that time, Xinyan's parents came to Zhu's house in red robes. The next day, Xinyan went into labor and gave birth to 2 sons. Since then, he has been in constant contact with the frog god family. Sometimes the residents offended the frog god and always prayed for Kunsheng first. Then they asked the women to dress up and enter the bedroom to worship Xinyan. As long as Xinyan smiles, the disaster will be resolved. There are so many descendants of the Zhu family that people named them a Watsi's family. People nearby don't dare to call it. Only people from far away call it this way. Also, the frog god often speaks through the mouth of witches. A witch can discern the joy and anger of God. Wu Ru told the believers, "God likes it, then blessings will come. If he says, God is angry, then the whole family sits blankly, sighing in sorrow, and some of them can't eat." Is this just the custom? Or is the frog god really a deity, and not completely false? There was a wealthy businessman named Zhou who was stingy by nature. At this time, local people were raising funds to build Guansheng Temple. No matter rich or poor, everyone was willing to contribute money and efforts. But Zhou Yang was the only one who refused to give up. After a long time, because the money raised was not enough, Guansheng Temple was still not built, and the leaders were at a loss. Once, when everyone was worshipping the frog god, the god suddenly possessed the witch and spoke. General Zhou Kang in front of Guansheng ordered the little god to take charge of fundraising matters. "Get me the account books." Quickly, everyone hurriedly handed over the account books. Wu said, "Those who have donated money should no longer be reluctant. Those who have not donated yet should write down the amount of money they want to donate according to their own ability." Everyone obeyed the order and wrote down the amount of silver they wanted to donate. Finally, Wu looked at the crowd and asked, "Is Zhou here?" Zhou was hiding behind the crowd, and he was afraid that the frog god knew he was coming. At this time, he was shocked when he heard the witch's question. He didn't dare not to answer, and moved his steps to the front with great reluctance. Wu pointed at the account book and said, "Please write down a donation of 100 taels." Zhou refused. Wu said angrily, "You paid 200 taels for the prostitution debt, and besides, this is a good thing." It turned out that Zhou had an affair with a woman, and her husband caught her on the spot, so he handed over 200 taels of silver. Atonement. So Frog God is now deliberately exposing his scandal. Zhou was ashamed and frightened, so he had no choice but to donate 100 taels of silver. Zhou told his wife about this after moving into the same house. The wife said, "This is a witch who is blackmailing you." After that, the witch came to the door many times and asked for silver, but Zhou always refused to give it. One day, Zhou was lying down and resting during the day when he suddenly heard a sound like a cow's panting coming from outside the door. When I looked up, I saw a huge frog. The door was just big enough for its body. It crawled stupidly and squeezed into the house through the two doors. Then he turned around and put his chin on the threshold. The family was terrified on Monday. Zhou said, "This must be to collect money." He burned incense and prayed, willing to hand over 30 taels first and the rest later. The frog didn't move at all. Zhou then said to pay 50 taels first, and the frog suddenly shrank to more than a foot in size. Zhou then added 20 taels, and the frog shrank again to the size of a bucket. Zhou said he was willing to hand over them all, and the frog shrank to the size of a fist, crawled out slowly, crawled into a crack in the wall and left. Zhou hurriedly took 50 taels of silver and sent it to the place where he supervised the construction of Guansheng Temple. People were surprised when they saw that the iron rooster had plucked its feathers, but Zhou didn't say the reason. A few days later, Wu said again, "Zhou still owes 50 taels of silver. Why don't you hurry up and urge him to pay it all?" Zhou was frightened after hearing this, so he had to send another 10 taels, hoping to end it there. One day, while Zhou and his wife were eating, the big frog came again, crawling into the house like last time, with its eyes wide open, as if it was angry. After a while, the giant frog climbed onto the bed again, shook the bed as if it was about to turn over, put his mouth on the pillow and fell asleep. The belly was swollen like a lying cow, filling all four corners. Zhou was very frightened, so he had to take out another 40 taels of silver to make up 100. But look at the frog on the bed. It's not moving at all. Within half a day, a group of small frogs gradually gathered. The next day, there were more frogs everywhere, in the granary and on the bed. A frog bigger than a bowl jumps on the stove to eat flies. Dead flies fell into the rice pot one after another, and then rotted away, making the rice filthy and uneatable. By the third day, even the yard was crowded with frogs, and there was no space left. Zhou's family was panicked and had no choice but to consult a witch. Wu said, "This must be because of the lack of money." When Zhou heard about it, he burned incense and prayed, wishing to add 20 taels to the 100 taels. Then the giant frog on the bed raised its head. After adding more, the giant frog raised 1 foot, until it was over again. When it reached 100 taels, the giant frog moved its 4 legs, got out of bed, and crawled out the door. "But I just climbed a few steps clumsily." He came back and lay inside the door. Zhou was scared and asked the witch what was going on. Wu figured out what it meant, asking Zhou to pay the money now. Zhou had no choice but to take out all the money and give it to the witch. And then the giant frog left. A few steps away, the body of the giant frog suddenly shrunk and was mixed in the frogs, making it no longer identifiable. The frogs gradually dispersed in confusion. After the Guansheng Temple is built, a dedication ceremony will be held, which requires additional fees. The witch suddenly pointed at a leader and said, "How many taels of silver should you contribute?" There were 15 people in the lead, and except for 2, they were all named by the witch to donate money. The leaders pointed to the 2 people who were not named and said, both of them, and we have already donated." Wu said, "I am not asking you to donate money because you are richer than the two of them. I am asking you to donate money based on the amount of silver you embezzled. The money is collected from everyone. You can't. Corruption and self-enrichment will probably lead to disasters in the future. It is very hard for you to take the lead in building the temple. So I ask you to donate the money you have embezzled to eliminate disasters for you. Except that the two of them are honest and upright and did not participate, so they can be exempted. My family witch, I will not protect him. Let him take out the silver first and give everyone a clue." After the witch finished speaking, he ran into the house and rummaged through the boxes. His wife asked him, but did not answer. She took all the money from the house and told everyone, "I, a family witch, have secretly deducted 8 taels of silver, and now let him spend all his money to pay for it." Everyone weighed the silver and found that there was only 6 taels more. So the wizard asked someone to write down the amount owed. Everyone was very shocked when they saw this scene. They didn't dare to argue anymore, and they all paid the money in full. After Wu woke up, he was at a loss and didn't know what had happened. Someone told him to pass by. The witch was so ashamed that he pawned his clothes to make up for the payment. Only 2 of them did not meet each other. As a result, one was ill for more than a month, and the other suffered from a big sore. The medical bills they spent far exceeded the money they owed and unpaid. People say this is retribution for embezzling donated money.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.